Welcome to the Law School Insider, where we have conversations with students, lawyers, and employers.
Succeeding in law school is something that you must prepare for, not only before you begin, but throughout your law school journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I will draw from my over 20 years of experience in the college admission field, as well as bring forth the experiences of others as we delve deeper into the issues. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Law School Insider. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I'm so excited to be able to have you back with us again this week. This week, we've got Melinda Budzynski, and Mindy is with the Summerfield Law Firm in Riverview, Florida. And Mindy is a recent graduate of Western Michigan University, Cooley Law School, and she has a great story to share about going out and starting your own law firm. And I was really impressed with some of the things that I had seen that she had written recently and some of the tips that she was sharing with alums. And I wanted her to be able to share some of those with you and to share some of her successes with you. So Mindy, thanks so much for being with us this week.
My pleasure.
So to start off today, Mindy, why don't we start by talking a little bit about your journey? And before we get into jumping out of law school and starting your own firm and those steps, let's take a couple steps back and talk about what was it about the law that drew you in, and what is it about the law that kind of sustains you in being a part of the profession now?
This is my second career, or third career actually, and for the majority of my adult life, I owned an insurance agency in Michigan. And during that time, I was involved in a very lengthy, very complicated insurance contract negotiations. And through that process, I dealt with attorneys and mediators and consultants, and I just found that whole process very fascinating. And so although law school wasn't on my radar at that time, a few years later when I was selling my my insurance agency, I started to think about going to law school. So I was actually 38 or 40 when I started law school.
Now, when you did go into law school, and as an adult student, you probably had a little bit different focus than a traditional age law student. But what did you find as being some of the things that you had to focus on, or some of the things that were most surprising to you as a adult student coming into law school?
Sure. So I had obviously been to undergrad, and I had got my master's in management a little bit later on in life. And since most of my earlier education had been in sales, marketing, and business management, I guess I was just used to more of a sales approach and being able to do creative writing and that sort of thing. And so when I found that law school was so black and white, that transition was actually very difficult for me, because I found myself always wanting to sell or convince. And so the whole having to use the rules, the format, found that very confining. And so it took me a good year before I kind of got used to that process.
Now, as you went through law school as well, you probably found that there were things that you had to do to find success for yourself in the law school journey. Are there specific hints or tips or resources that you might want to share with others that were beneficial to you, or as you look back on your law school journey, are there things that you wish that you would have done or that you would do differently?
I think one of the main things that helped was to get involved early on. So any opportunity that I had to be in a legal services environment, whether it was volunteering through clinics that the school offered, or doing internships, or even just going outside of the school, suggested opportunities, and just talking to attorneys, visiting them in their office, or going to court and observing. I think all of those things were crucial to helping me feel more comfortable in the industry and really learning how to navigate certain things. I also developed close relationships with several professors who just offered me very, very good and useful information. And it was important to develop those relationships with professors who I felt like I had a connection with, or we had something in common with. And some of them were definitely more approachable than others, but there were several that were essential in that process.
Now, I know that you decided after law school to start your own practice and to kind of hang your shingle out there. And we have had Professor Gary Bauer on the show in the past, and he talked about the solo legal practitioner and some of the things that he had a perspective of. But as someone that has gone out there and that has done this, what were some of the big aha moments for you and some of the things that you learned along the way that you might want to impart on others if they are thinking that they want to do the same?
Sure. So one of the most important things that I tell law students and recent grads is you have to have experience. You have to go to court or work in a law firm setting, whether it's as an intern, extern, whatever. You have to be around other practicing attorneys because so much of what you glean will be from them. And actually, I learned a ton about navigating the system from paralegals. I mean, paralegals do all of the grunt work. They know how things are filed. They know the format in which to put documents. They know how to sign on to different, I mean, just very practical things. And so I think if you don't have any of that type of practical experience, it will be a struggle. I worked in 2 different firms, one right out of law school where I had worked as an extern, and then I left that firm and went to a small firm where I was just with one other attorney, but I was able to go into court all the time. I was able to bounce things off of her. She would look over my work, she would make suggestions to me. And she only practiced in one area, which was family law. So I had to really build a network of people that I could call on to be able to ask them how to do things. And I found myself in very big cases early in my career where I was completely out of my league. But of course, I couldn't let my client know that. So I really relied on more seasoned attorneys to help me navigate that. And I will say, I don't think I could have opened up my own firm without having that experience under my belt. It would have been, I think, a huge disservice to my clients.
So it sounds like networking is definitely key. And building that network from day one is something that's going to help you to open up doors for the future. So how did you build your network, and how are you continuing to build that network that is opening up a client base for yourself for the future?
Sure. So one of the most important things that I did was I became involved in business networks in the area where I live. And so whether it was the Chamber of Commerce, specific networking groups, women's networking groups, whatever it was, I must have tried out over 24 before I really honed in on the 3 or 4 that I thought I could be committed to and where I would get business. I also became involved in some of the local bar associations. Here in Florida, there's a very strong women's association called Florida Association of Women Lawyers, and I became involved in that group. And so it was being involved in networking groups that were within the legal industry, but more importantly for building my practice, it was becoming involved in the community and networking groups outside of the legal community. And both of those were essential. And I will tell you, it was attending networking events was like a part-time job for me for several years, just because I was new to the area. I'd never lived in the Tampa Bay area before I graduated from law school. So it was essential for me to be able to sort of put down my roots to attend these various events.
Now, are there any other things that were pitfalls for you, things that you wish you would have done when you first started your practice, or things that you're still working on right now that are helping you to find the success in your own firm?
Well, I think one of the mistakes that a lot of law students make is either deciding that they want to practice in a particular area of law and not being open to other areas, or the opposite, and thinking they can practice in too many areas. I learned very quickly that as an attorney, you cannot practice in everything. You just can't. It's not practical. There's too much to keep track of, too much learning, CLE. So I really had to hone in on the skills that I had, the things that I enjoyed. And when starting my own firm, the areas that I thought there was enough business in that I could have a steady flow of clients. And so when I started my own firm at the beginning of this year, I did it with an eye on serving what I considered an underserved portion of society. And so based on that, I just looked at the needs of that demographic, and I formulated my business plan based on that.
Well, these are great tips and great advice, and I really appreciate you sharing all of these. Is there any other thoughts that you have on finding success in law school, or even as you start your career, that you might want to impart before we finish up today?
Sure. So I'm really into learning and constantly paying attention to trends. And Florida, I think, is a state that's really great for keeping in touch with its bar members and communicating what's going on in the legal community. So there's a lot of talk about access to justice and serving underprivileged or just the part of society that feel that they cannot afford attorneys. So I think for a lot of students and new attorneys, they really have to find a way to get to those clients, because there's a ton of competition in the legal community from online service providers. And really, to me, that's where the opportunities lie in this profession. There's so many people who feel that they can't afford an attorney. And quite frankly, they can't. They don't have $3,000 or $5,000. And so I see my current firm as being someplace that people can come, and for $300, $500, $700, they can get legal work done and be able to communicate with me, an attorney, and ask questions and have assistance navigating through the legal process.
Well, that is wonderful advice, and I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you sharing all of these hints and tips today. And I just want to say thank you for being on the show, and I am looking forward to hearing and seeing more about your success in the future.
Well, thank you.
Well, that was another great guest this week on the Law School Insider. If you have an interest in being a guest on the show, drop me an email at lawschoolinsider@Cooley, COOLEY.edu. And thank you all for listening today, and remember, you have the ability and right to take control of your law school's success. I hope you'll continue listening, creating a plan for success that will prepare you to achieve the dreams that you have set for yourself. Talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. You're on your way to being a law school insider.